weekend. We got to cover it all, so let's get into it.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
We never cover it all, but, you know, at least we can try. Joe Camaranno from PC is here, my political science friend, who will give us his own perspective on what's happening with the Supreme Court, what's happening with the GOP and Democratic primary races, what's happening at PC today. There's a lot going on, no doubt. Nice to have you aboard. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Dan York's State of Mind as we come off the three-day President's Day weekend. Let's run to the rundown and just kind of tackle a couple of things that are going on. I have to talk to you about what feels like a special deal environment here right now. A couple of headlines on Ocean State job lot. Expansion, truck tolls, you know, the governor doesn't necessarily believe that Ocean State job lot will not expand because of the truck tolls, but they're looking for some financial break of some kind. It just, it's hard to follow. Here's what Mark Perlman, the owner of Ocean State Job Lot, said on Newsmakers this weekend.
I've told all my associates, and I've told the governor, and I've told the speaker that it's our intent to build this warehouse, not because it's the best place to build it. It's not. My consultants have advised me we could save $4 to $5 million if we opened up this warehouse in Pennsylvania. And I said to them, Rhode Island has treated us well. This is where we've educated our kids. This is where we live. We're going to put the warehouse here. And so my reward for giving up $4 or $5 million was to have an additional burden thrown on my shoulders.
He estimates he's got $1 million burden from the truck tolls added into his business plan. Okay, so he's got the 500,000 square foot facility at $50 million ready to go, but now it's suspended. Then he tells the Journal the following: a lot of reports about me leaving. I'm not leaving. I told the governor, the House Speaker, the Senate President, because of the lack of clarity on the total cost of the legislation, the beginning of his construction's on hold. That legislation is the truck toll legislation, but he wants to stay. So he's coming on the radio tomorrow at 1 o'clock on WPRO. So we'll try to get some answers. But the problem here is, look, you may know how I feel about the truck tolls. I think it's insane. It's an insane plan. I get we need revenue. There had to be a way for us to make this thing happen with a combination of borrowing and at pay-as-you-go. The marketing of the tolls is going to kill us. It's just the wrong way to approach this whole thing. So I'm with Mr. Perlman on that. But it seems like now the House is, and the Senate are going to see if they can come up with some kind of subsidy program in the back door to cure the local dilemma that we have with the tolls. Meanwhile, Mr. Perlman's got $7.5 million worth of incentives from the Commerce Corporation on his 500,000 square foot facility that he's building. Are you following? There's like two different tracks here. And this is the typical Rhode Island business problem. No one knows what the heck anybody's talking about. So hopefully we get some clarity this week. And I don't think I helped you at all with that purposefully. Quick, jump to the national news. Peyton Manning's in big trouble. He's in big trouble because he needs a crisis manager of some kind. First, he had the whole thing with his performance-enhancing drug delivery to his home in 2011, as reported by Al Jazeera, and he had this to say about it.
I understand when an allegation is made that the NFL has no choice to investigate it. I get that. But I can tell you what they're going to find, a big fat nothing.
Well, okay, now we have a big fat something, which is litigation coming against the University of Tennessee for what was an environment of sexual harassment alleged. And now you're going to learn more about a sealed case that Peyton Manning had filed against him. And if you read the actual details of what he's alleged to have done, you're going to get kind of grossed out. There he was back in the day. I'm sure the University of Tennessee has cleaned up its act, because most academic and athletic institutions have cleaned up their acts when it comes to the kind of sexual harassment environment that could be in those places. But right now, he's got two decisions he's got to make: whether he wants to continue as an NFL football player and whether he's going to be a marketable commodity. And he better get going and answer to the litigation immediately. And if he doesn't, the clock's ticking on both of those decisions, and none of them are going to come out with the kind of end that he's hoping for, which is such a shame based on an illustrious NFL career and a Super Bowl victory. Taylor Swift is awesome, right? She's just awesome. I mean, I literally work out to Taylor Swift music. Did I have to admit that? I do. Not every workout, but we've got headlines here, right? She wins. By the way, she could use a meal. Am I allowed to say that? I mean, she's, come on. My goodness. And of course, she had to make a speech like she always does.
And as the first woman to win Album of the Year at the Grammys twice, I want to say to all the young women out there, there are going to be people along the way who will try to undercut your success or take credit for your accomplishments or your fame. But if you just focus on the work and you don't let those people sidetrack you, someday when you get where you're going, you'll look around and you will know that it was you and the people who love you who put you there. And that will be the greatest feeling in the world. Thank you for this moment.
Couldn't you just say it was cool and thanks? You know, she's very deep, she's very troubled, she's very dramatic, which is what all her music is about. Deep and troubled and dramatic. It's like she almost wrote a song there with the acceptance speech. Lighten up, Taylor. Take a walk, you know, down on your Rhode Island shoreline. Soak it all in. Chill. All right, look, we got a serious situation here with the passing of Antonin Scalia, don't you think? Headline, confusion, conflicting reports. I'm not going to feed into that. I'm not going to investigate that situation here. But here's a CBS summary of all that happened this weekend and what's going on now.
The owner of the West Texas ranch where Justice Antonin Scalia died says the 79-year-old was found in complete repose in his room on Saturday. Scalia was on a hunting trip and was his, quote, usual personable self the night before. Professionally, he was known as a conservative titan while serving the nation's highest court.
If it's a question of individual rights and individual liberties, that's what I'm there for.
Scalia's sudden death leaves the Supreme Court evenly divided, with 4 conservative and 4 liberal justices. On the campaign trail, candidates on both sides have reframed the presidential election as a referendum on the High Court's future.
We are one justice away from the Supreme Court ruling that none of us have a First Amendment right to follow our faith.
Every GOP candidate has said the next president should appoint Scalia's replacement, but President Obama pledged he would do it.
I plan to fulfill my constitutional responsibilities to nominate a successor in due time.
Demonstrators gathered on the snowy steps of the Supreme Court Monday, urging senators to consider the president's decision.
What we don't want to happen is for Congress to hold the Supreme Court hostage.
Despite his controversial opinions, Scalia had deep friendships with liberal justices, many of whom are praising his dedication as they grieve.
So there's a good wrap. Yosef Cammarano is our political science professor. Nice to have you back.
Good to be here.
What's your gut check on this latest tragic developments?
Scalia changed the entire way we interpret the Constitution. And so this is the loss of a giant of the size and proportion of someone like William Brennan, which is sort of the liberal version of Scalia, where law students, lawyers, and constitutional scholars are completely different in the way they interpret the Constitution because of him.
You know, I asked on the radio today, what would Scalia do? If I'm not mistaken, and I haven't proffered this with you, so you might tell me I'm all wet, which has happened before here, Joe. Also, feel free. But there's a lot of suggestion that he was an originalist when it comes to the Constitution. That he really, really understood the literal intent, literal meaning of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And given that, he would say, of course the president has a right to nominate my replacement and knock it off. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. He is what's called a textualist, that's his term. And he believes that if there's a plain meaning, then you follow it, and that's it. He talked about the dead Constitution or the enduring Constitution. It's very clear, Article 2, Section 2.
Republicans they ought to get a shovel because they just keep digging themselves a larger and larger hole here. Not that it wouldn't be flipped. I get it. But there's 11 months left in the presidency. The president has a right to nominate. Now, if he doesn't get somebody up into the moderate level where the Republicans could actually digest the whole conversation, well, then he fails in his nomination. But do they have to proffer that it's dead on arrival and impact the political race the way they're doing?
Well, I just got out of class where I said to my students, you gotta be careful that you're not watching the shiny object in front of your face. Mitch McConnell took a very quick preemptive move, in large part because he's trying to buy time. In some ways, it's a no-win situation for McConnell because he's got 5 Republicans who are elected in Democratic states, who are up for re-election, who are vulnerable, and any debate or discussion is likely to hurt their re-election chances. And so I think he's trying to buy time, and so that's the first salvo. When Obama submits a nominee, I'm sure he'll accept it. I'm sure he'll give it to Chuck Grassley. Remember, it takes more than 2 years already for judicial appointments to go through, and so it's not going to happen anyway. It's just sort of the posturing.
That's the timetable. It takes that long these days?
Under Obama, and under the McConnell Senate, it takes years, not months, to pass any nomination. There are some nominees who are 2 years old.
So the whole thing is a non-starter. Why do we have Republican candidates all making stump speeches or comments at the debate that the president should wait? What kind of sportsmanship are they expecting the president to offer? He's going to finish his 8th year with a nomination. I would expect that the Constitution allows and promotes that action.
Yeah, and I do think there'll be a nomination. I bet you there'll be hearings and there might even be a vote. And Obama's probably going to be smart and nominate someone who used to work for Republicans. But I think what's going on with the campaign is more certain candidates will benefit from this discussion in the short term, Ted Cruz particularly. Ted Cruz can rile up sort of his base and maybe pull some of the evangelicals away from Donald Trump.
All right, well, we're going to get into the race here in a second.
Sure.
What's your executive summary then on where you think this whole process is going to go for the replacement of Justice Scalia? And by the way, do you have a thought, as I did today, can we bury a historic icon who lived in our midst without all of this stuff?
Yeah, we can. And actually, the one person, well, the Supreme Court is indeed doing that, all the justices, but also President Obama is. He's waiting. He's good.
Well, that he said anything offended everybody. I found no quarrel with what the president said the other night.
Of course not. Of course not. If it were a Republican president who said the same thing in the flipped context, my guess is most people who are upset with Obama wouldn't be upset with the Republican. That's the problem with our political system. Everything is so politicized, and I'm with you on this. Scalia was widely adored by liberals and conservatives alike, despite his caustic opinions sometimes, because he was a very charming, decent human being.
We really race to poison the well.
Yeah.
In our political environment right
Absolutely. And it doesn't help when you have, people threatening that, oh my goodness, we're going to have our guns taken away, or the First Amendment, religious liberties are going to be taken away, which is absolute nonsense, and they know it. They should stop doing it.
All right, we'll come back and talk more about the primaries. Stay with us. All right, so continuing with the rundown items that we have here, the last item on our list tonight is South Carolina, and of course, there are headlines everywhere. A fight in the trenches from South Carolina to Nevada, because those two primaries are coming up. Here's the latest on what's going on in South Carolina.
Jeb Bush. George W. Bush took the stage in South Carolina Monday to help give his younger brother Jeb's campaign an extra boost. The former president gave a speech with thinly veiled jabs at Donald Trump. Trump hit right back.
Why do you mention Jeb Bush? He's not competitive. Although his brother came today, they're having a thing they're trying to make competitive, but I don't think it's going to happen personally.
But Trump reserved his deepest insults for Ted Cruz.
I think Ted's a very unstable guy. I've never seen anybody that lied as much.
Whatever. A lie. Okay. A few weeks ago, you were absolutely certain that Trump was all done. Last week on the radio, you told me you were at the 90% confidence level.
I think I said 92.
That it was all done, 92. Where are you right now?
About 94. I'm moving back in that direction. Yeah, I do think Scalia's death actually hurts Trump, because Trump is drawing a significant portion of evangelicals, and Ted Cruz is charging very hard on the issues that they care about, religious freedom particularly, saying that this matters, and they wouldn't trust Trump on that.
Because Trump doesn't have the sophistication of...
Well, the argument that Trump's not a true conservative works when you go outside of the economic populism and sort of the anti-Washington, the outsider status. When you start thinking about who's he going to appoint to the Supreme Court, I think evangelicals are going to start pausing. He's from New York.
He was flailing the other night on the debate. I know you didn't get a chance to see it, but
I did read about it.
Yeah, he was flailing. He called Cruz a liar 4 times. He treated Jeb Bush in such an unmercifully rude way. I get style and substance issues are not the concern of the electorate that supports Donald Trump, but it's getting to the point where I think most people got to look at him and say, "My God, this guy is this." It was as if he was on a bender. I don't understand what's going on here.
This is the first debate where he was the focus of all attacks. Before, it was trying to figure out who is going to get knocked out of New Hampshire, which one of the middle-of-the-road Republicans was going to sort of have to leave. That's all done now, and so they're all attacking him because he's in charge. He's in front. He's never been a legitimate front-runner until now. The other thing is that, look, he really doesn't know how to do this, and this is part of my recurring theme. He's a rookie. He may be a billionaire, but he's a rookie, and it showed.
George W. has come in for his brother. South Carolina, I guess, is a good place for it. Got a little thing here.
Jeb's a man of humble, deep, and genuine faith. Faith that reveals itself through good works, not loud words.
All right, so, W took a hell of a whack from Trump the other night. The discussion is how George W. Bush kept America safe after 9/11. He's screaming bloody murder, but it's 9/11 that he actually presided over it. Now, listen, there's some arguments that can be made there, but his style in making the argument had me in a fetal position watching the whole thing. And now George is stepping in for Jeb. What do you think about Bush for Bush in this? But it feels like one last push, and maybe not.
I think it's really unwise for someone like Donald Trump in a Republican primary in a state that's very patriotic, very militaristic, very supportive of George W. Bush, to go in and basically trash him. And I think it's going to hurt him. His polling numbers are still in the mid-30s to low 30s, but he's never going to get anything over that.
What's George's impact for Jeb?
I think George's impact for Jeb is minimal. Again, there tend to be, just like Supreme Court, there are short-term effects, and then there are things that look like they might be short-term effects and won't be. And I think the Bush for Bush is one of those things. I think Jeb Bush, if he doesn't get 20% of the vote, he's done. That's it.
This primary?
This primary. He has to get 20% in South Carolina.
When will he bail, though? He's got a lot of resources still.
I think he's probably going to bail when... I'm not sure when he's going to bail, because I'm not sure he's in it because he wants to be in it. I think he feels obliged, and that's the worst kind of candidate, because they'll stay in long beyond, and it just becomes this really sad thing to watch.
Why don't you go from 6 to 2 or 3 and really get a race going here?
Yeah.
When does it happen? Does Carson?
I think
Carson seems somewhat belligerent about getting out.
Carson's kind of on this. It's like he's going on this whirlwind tour around the country now. He's not serious. He couldn't even figure out whether to get on stage. A couple debates ago. I think Kasich, Bush. Those two have to figure out which one's going to remain. Rubio will stay in.
Kasich feels like a much more viable candidate to me than George Bush, Jeb Bush does.
I have to tell you, Kasich is the most electable Republican.
Right, and can he survive? Can he survive and get into?
Yeah, he can.
And get into that Midwestern primary thing.
Yeah, Michigan's coming up pretty soon. Michigan's a big primary for Republicans, and if Kasich does as well as Trump or nearly as well as Trump, then he'll be the serious candidate.
And Rubio hangs where?
I think Rubio seems to be doing well in South Carolina, and I think he's going to probably stay in it for the duration. It's increasingly looking like no one's going to have a majority going into the convention, so we have the old brokered convention like 1968.
Everyone poo-pooed that we'd have one, but it seems like everyone's, the top 4 or 5, they're stuck, and they're gonna make sure that nobody has a majority of the delegates.
Yeah, two things are happening. First, nobody anticipated Donald Trump actually being able to tap into 25–30% of the vote. Number two, we're in an era where these candidates are so egocentric in their understanding of politics. They think they're the most important thing in the world, and it's harder to get rid of those kind of candidates.
But what about on the other side? Is Bernie the same? Little snippet from Bernie.
As a matter of fact, the campaign was already over. Why run? The establishment had determined who the Democratic nominee would be. But then a funny thing happened. The people became involved in the campaign.
Is he going to hold on?
Bernie's going to hold on.
He's coming.
He's going to hold on. Odds are Hillary's going to win South Carolina, but if she doesn't get over 53–54%, then Bernie is seen as strong. Michigan, Bernie's going to do well because Michigan is an old labor state and a lot of Bernie supporters. She's going to have a contest through the spring, through June.
Does she survive?
I was 100%. I'm about 97% now. But yes, I think she will survive. He'll toughen her up, and she'll be a better candidate in the fall.
All right. Joe teaches at PC. A little news out of there today. We'll have a quick thought from him when we come back. Stay with us. A little turbulence at PC. Joe Cammarano is a professor there. A couple of headlines that I can show here. RI Future, kids ran into President Shanley's office today. Other headlines that have been here in the past. The off-campus incident might be a whole bunch more. That was last couple of weeks ago. I'm told by some of the folks at PC that may be a more miscommunication than a real racial issue at this party. But these 40, 50 kids took over the office today, and as we record late in the afternoon, they're due out. So you've probably seen what happened. What's your take? This notion that it's almost an anti-black African American type of disposition they're suggesting. That's a hard charge.
It is, but the PC is going through the growing pains that I saw at my college back in the late 70s and early 80s, where there was an influx of non-traditional students, non-Caucasian students, and but not the institutional resources to support them. And so the attrition rate is much higher. And there are some real problems, particularly in certain disciplines where the attrition rate, like in biology, is more than twice and maybe even 3 times as high in the first year, in the first course for non-Caucasians.
Well, do they have a point? Not that we can...
They do.
The general public's not going to get this debate.
I know, it's inside pool. But it's part of the growing pains. 10 years ago, we decided that we really wanted to become a national university, we wanted to become more diverse. And we have. But I don't think we understand that when you make those sorts of decisions a few years down the road, you're going to have to address change.
So you think these kids have a legitimate argument?
Somewhat, yeah.
Yeah. All right. We'll try to invite them in and see what their point of view is. Thank you, Professor. Always good to see you. Final word when we come back. Stay with us. The PC thing, I think it's going to take, it's a really interesting dynamic, It's a private institution with a public persona. And that's a hard line to ride, but I would think that Father Shanley may want to just kind of let his guard down a little bit here, do a little listening, because you know what? That goes a long way. Doesn't mean you have to give the store away. We'll see you on the radio tomorrow with Ocean State Job Lot. Bye.